Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. And tonight we'll explore the third in a series of 3 on the power of recognition. But as always, first starting with a reflection. Sometimes our attention is so caught up in the noise outside, the world outside, what we need to do, what we see others doing, different scenes and situations. And the world outside can cross over the different aspects of time. Thinking about situations that have been in the past or worrying about situations to come. All caught up in the noise outside. And that noise can be so loud, it can blind me from really seeing what's going on inside. And so these seated moments of being quiet, stepping into neutral ground, very simple space inside, where all the noise stays outside. And I come into a neutral space of peace. Where I might be able to see more clearly and more deeply what is really going on within the self. Because it's inside where life really happens. Om Shanti. Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. So as Judy mentioned, thank you for joining for the third part of this series. And I feel that the reflection is actually a good introduction to it. So if I have it correctly, the third part is finishing power. So why have a third part? What is this third part? Significance.
I saw a quote today. It was a quote by Rumi, and I really was pulled to it. It feels related to this topic that looks at the image of a tree, and there might be decay or something unhealthy going on in the tree, and I might sort of see that that's going on. And then I start to do what I feel or recognize is the best way to treat it. I just start to prune the branches or but this talked about going into the roots and being able to see or recognize what the real cause, often the deep cause of the difficulty is, and being able to address it at that level so it doesn't keep coming back. And I just really liked this quote a lot, and actually went on to suggest that most people are comfortable staying in the branches and very few actually go into the roots. Even though we have the phrase root of the problem, we still aren't quite sure or recognize what that root is. And so and this is where again we enter the realm of spirituality. To be able to go really to the root, I'd have to go into the invisible, less in the outside world, more into the spiritual realm.
So what happens then in light of this topic of the power of recognition? What happens if I don't go into the root of the issue? And how is that relevant to what one needs to recognize?
One of the things that happens a lot when we're experiencing distress, and actually it happens when we're experiencing happiness too, is that we think the root or cause is something outside. And for better or worse, if it's happiness, then I start to attach to what I perceive to be the cause of the happiness, the root of it, and I just develop attachment to it, which ironically is setting me up for sorrow. And very often, if I'm experiencing distress, I tend to think it's a situation or person that is the cause. I get very, very convinced, and I start to think about that, and that's as far as my recognition goes. And so what we tend to then do is either try to move away from or push that person or situation away because I feel that that is the cause of my problem. And in either case, I might start to notice it hasn't finished, but it comes up again with a different person or situation. It just keeps coming up. And so to be able to recognize two very important things, that the cause of the problem is always 100% of the time within the self. And it's based on some spiritual issues that are actually common to us all, based on forgetting, but also that there is not just the problem is within myself, but equally important to recognize the solution is within myself. Some say they don't want to face or look inside because they're afraid that they're going to see that the problem is themselves, and that will be overwhelming. So when I look, I want to be able to identify, recognize, okay, I see what's going on within me, but also see the capacities that the solution is also within me, so that it doesn't feel overwhelming or frightening to really get to the root of the problem. So I feel both are very important in recognition.
So, in terms of just perhaps me touching on the first two sessions in this session, the first session about we're really good at creating things and we're not very good at sustaining things. And obviously, this is in terms of the context of Raja Yoga, which is about transforming myself from the inside out. And so, in terms of, as they say, bring it home, we're trying to break cycles. So, how does the power of recognition help to break those cycles and not have things sort of come up again and again and again?
There's two parts to the study of Raj Yoga. And the idea, the reason there's two parts and not just one part, but two parts, is because of the finishing power. So the first part is, we call it knowledge, to consider myself to be a soul, to recognize I am a spiritual being. And that unlocks certain things within me. And that's wonderful. But what souls start to notice is, okay, I'm a peaceful being. My true nature is peace. I have all of these qualities. It's fantastic. So why am I still getting upset? Why am I still affected by things? What hasn't been, I've got these wonderful, but it feels like there's some other things in there still. And some even feel like they have a personality disorder, on one side, so peaceful and sweet. And then, I remember
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Sorry?
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, I'm remembering one, we were reminded recently, one story where for a year we were asked to really finish all anger within the self. And this referred to every aspect of anger. The gross forms are easy, but when you look at irritation, impatience, these subtle forms, tension, rushing, these subtle forms of anger, finish all forms of anger. And I found that year really interesting because we actually were told that we would not be able to visit the spiritual headquarters, which is a main form of sustenance for us, unless we were anger-free. And what I think we realized is no one would be going. Because rather than becoming free from anger, it seemed the anger erupted. so because we were looking at it so deeply, it was always there. And I remember one soul in particular who is like such a gentle, easygoing soul, and he shared, and he's just, I was to this day I'm surprised, because even as he shared, his gentleness was speaking. He said, I found I was free from anger until the year that we had to focus on becoming free from anger, and then I realized how much anger I had. So how do I finish this? Even though we just seem strange to ourselves. I'm experiencing so much peace, and yet there's still this other stuff going on. And that's why we need the second half of the study, the finishing power. So I want to recognize I am a soul. I also want to recognize, this is where the capacities come, the solution, I am a child of God. And this is called yoga. So Raj, this royalty of the self, comes when I realize I'm a soul, the dignity, as we like to say. But the yoga part, the finishing, all the bits that are not me, but have really, really attached to me, seems to almost be integrated into my personality, to finish them to the point that we actually think they're human nature. That's where I need yoga. This experience, and the reason I'm saying child of God is that it doesn't work unless I experience myself to be a child of God. I can't simply think about God. It's actually the relationship that brings the power. it has to be that real, that connected, that deep, the connection with that being. I am a child of that one. And that sense of belonging has a power to it that literally melts and finishes the aspects that are not truly me. And so that's that recognition of these two aspects, that I am a soul, but also I am a child of the Supreme Soul. It is that relationship that's going to create a power that can finish these bits that seem to keep popping up.
So is it then that someone, I wouldn't say necessarily give up, but perhaps maybe delays or prolongs, the finishing of something? What causes that delaying or the distraction?
Right. I think there's a couple of things that can happen. We have deep habits of battling, largely based on ego. It's always the feeling that I can do this myself. And very often, when we are attached to a certain approach or method to something, even when it's not working, we simply just try harder, right? It's clearly not working, but I just will try harder because I'm so attached to that belief. So that's one thing that could be causing a problem, is that I'm aware of we had a beautiful class today on faith, the difference between faith and trust. And one thing I was feeling, because we feel they're very close, one thing I was feeling is I have faith. I believe this is a good thing. I believe it will work, but I'm still not using it. I'm not trusting it. The actual implementation of what I have faith in isn't happening. And that can get confused. I can think, oh yeah, no, I believe it, and actually think I'm using it. Not necessarily. I don't trust it. I'm not actually using it. I'm still using some of my other stuff. So that can be a big problem. The other is that because we became so separated from the Supreme Soul, healing that relationship. I don't know which is more difficult, actually, to heal the relationship with the self or to heal the relationship with God. And both are so critical to transformation. But healing the relationship with the Supreme Soul, really awakening it, making it as real, more real than any of the physical relationships I have, seems to be a struggle for us. And so I think that can cause a little disheartenment in the soul. We kind of start to give up or fake it. And I think we have to be just a little bit more patient. Again, just giving ourselves time, which we've talked about in previous sessions. Give ourselves, it's been, when something's been neglected or not used over a long period of time, it's not going to change overnight, especially when there's a lot of other things that I became deeply attached to. So it takes a little time. But I think if one can be patient, they start to feel, taste, little tastes of the realness of that relationship, and that encourages us to keep going.
Some might find that spirituality is quite abstract and hard to apply, or hard to find its relevance or sense of practicality, I would say. When it comes to this and finishing power, and perhaps, it's one of the things that is addressed is, we talk about it in the Raj Yoga Essentials, which is aim and objective. And when you were sharing, I was thinking about two examples you have given. I know that you work in the fitness industry, and you're, whether the participant or someone in the front of the room who's telling the participants to do 5 more, 3 more, and it's like, okay, you have 1 minute left. You do as much as you can. What do you think that seems to kick things up into a higher gear? Because perhaps even souls don't even really know what it means, what finishing power is, what it is, that extra, I don't know, the extra dose of energy that's required to not give up.
Yeah. You know, one thing I do find it interesting, this capacity to override or to recruit. I do think we have a lot in us, a lot more in us than we think. And it's incredible how our own thoughts and attitudes can affect us. So when you started that question about some think spirituality is abstract, I always find that I know exactly what you mean because it's not visible or physical, but everybody is affected. It's what matters to everyone, right? The peace, the happiness, it's all invisible stuff that we care about at the end of the day. We're trying to get at them. If you're talking about aim and objective, we're trying to get at them through physical means. All we're suggesting in Raja Yoga is that you go for the things you're going for anyways, the peace and happiness. You go for these invisible things or spiritual things through spiritual means. That's all we're suggesting. So, which makes total sense to me. But anyway, so it's kind of a funny thing. So much of the invisible stuff is ruling, or is really running the game. And a key part of that invisible stuff is attitudes and thoughts and perspective and will and all of these things. And yes, I can see in a fitness class, it's really remarkable. I remember once, and again, it's so based on so many different invisible factors. But I remember once it was a class and there was a soul who always comes and they stand in the same place and they do the same thing. And there's absolutely zero change in their fitness levels. And I don't know what was going on this year at this moment. Something must have been happening, maybe subbing, or I don't know. But I remember I decided to just give a little bit more attention on them because I think I must have been subbing the class. I don't usually teach the soul. I'm usually with them in the class. And just really focused on them, but with a particular attitude, which was deep belief that they can do this. And just some cueing. And I literally saw them executing the exercise in a way I've never seen before. And I couldn't help but say, have you had that in you all along? And it never came. Like, you had the capacity and it never came out. Like, it's not like she suddenly, it felt like it was always there. So what was that about? And again, I think there's a link to recognizing the self, recognizing who I belong to. We have these incredible capacities inside that are untapped. And all we want to do is access these capacities, that little bit more push, override that can just finish things. And it's not violent, actually. It just is this emergence of an inner dignity, actually. I've had enough with not thinking well of myself is really what it's about. Like, I deserve better. I think more of myself, right? A deep self-respect that you just are done with habits that are quite self-destructive. It requires, it might take a little bit of time for them to completely finish, but there's that moment. We have the phrase in a second. There is that moment when it's as if done and you're just going through the motions. We compare it to boarding a plane. It takes a second to board the plane. I'm on the plane. Now, it's not that I've arrived at my destination, but the fact that I've boarded the plane is as good as being there, because there's just one place this plane is going. Now I just go through the motions of flying there, but I am there. The decision to board that plane, took a second. So this deep, we say sometimes determination, but it's tapping into something quite deep in the soul. And I'm thinking now of a story I had once heard, and I can't remember all the details. It was an interview, these incredible pilgrimages that people are still doing in Europe, these religious pilgrimages. And so it was this young man sharing, he decided to do one of these pilgrimages, and there was moments, long moments in his journey where he would be alone in open space, open fields in the middle of nowhere. Sounds quite dangerous, actually. So this was one such case. He was traveling through some field or something, completely alone, not humanity anywhere in sight. He's completely alone, and then he starts to hear wolves. He starts to hear wolves, and he's like, I'm done. He's the one who's going to be finished, actually. He's like, oh my goodness. At first there was this fear that was coming because he could see these wolves moving in on him. And as he describes it, he has no idea what emerged in him, where it came from, or where the thought came from. But by some instinct, I don't know, because really he was in fear, but something else, something very powerful emerged in him, and he unleashed some primal crazy scream or yell, or I don't know what, that literally terrified the wolves. They all went running away, and that was the end of it. And then he marched on. And I remember hearing that. I thought, wow, that's like, what came out of him? He had fear at one point, but then something, and I think of it as a self-preservation that exists within each of us. And the self-preservation, that was a physical example, but I think it's ultimately on a spiritual level. There is some instinct inside that wants to preserve the dignity and capacity of the self. It has a limit how far we can self-destruct. We do not totally self-destruct. At some point, some self-preservation kicks in, and it brings with this incredible power and capacity to override. And I don't know how far against the wall we need to be pushed before it will come up, but it's there. And then we get to just see what we're capable of in terms of spiritual development. But it's in there. That's why there's that feeling, that solution. To say I'm a child of God means it's in there. And so, yes, on a very limited example, you see that in a fitness class, but you can see it depends so much on whether that shift has happened. That freedom from ego has happened, that self-respect is really pulling the soul into a greater override, into a greater place. And then you just, you see amazing. I really, actually, that's one of the things I enjoy the most, playing with when I am in a fitness class. And I don't mean to a damaging or destructive way, but playing with attitudes and capacities, attitudes towards the self. And you can hear that voice saying, no, you can't. And then you hear another voice. Sometimes it's the instructor saying, yes, you can. And they like to use that phrase, you've got a lot in you, dig deep. And I think that's what spirituality is about, is really digging deep into the self, and once you're digging deep, you've left the physical, you're going to spiritual realms.
So it sounds like on a practical level, there needs to be some time to have these honest conversations with oneself.
Yeah, and I think to respect the timing is different. We really did spend a long time not thinking of ourselves in this way and not using those capacities, so they could be locked at the back of a cupboard for all we know. So to respect the timing too.
These sessions really feels like it seems like broad topics, perhaps, but I feel that what inspired these sessions were given what I am learning in Raja Yoga, especially these core elements of soul and supreme soul. What is yoga? What is meditation? All these things that we do address in the Essentials of Raja Yoga course. It's again that piece that I keep hearing from souls. It feels so abstract. I don't know what to do with this information. But there's another example I suddenly felt pulled to ask you to share in terms of this piece, because again, you hear that souls find it, how do I transfer, what I'm learning, or these examples I hear. and still be able to follow perhaps maybe the instructions, so to speak, in terms of what it means to consider myself to be a soul. What does it mean to, to be clear of the method and the direction I'm going. And so this is the famous Pink Panther story. Because I really think of Finishing Power, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps maybe you want to share about the Pink Panther story, because it'd be like, what is she talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it was so long ago, I wonder if I'm even telling it properly anymore. Back in the Stone Age, before recycling was a way of life, I remember in school, they were just starting to introduce recycling into the schools, into our way of life. And so the school I was at was going to have a poster competition amongst the students to educate and inform and introduce this idea of recycling. And so it was wide open, whatever you wanted to draw or write or say on your poster. And so I liked art, so I decided I'd do it. I don't know where I'm sure the poster made no sense whatsoever, but somehow the Pink Panther was involved. Doesn't even make sense. But anyways, so the Pink Panther was on my poster, and I had chosen pink poster paper, big sheet of pink, heavy paper, because, Pink Panther is pink. So I drew the Pink Panther and everything else, all the ideas on there. And it was a big piece of paper. And so I drew the outline of the Pink Panther. And in my mind, I knew it would be better if I didn't just outline the pink, but I actually colored it all, even though the paper was pink, and that was my idea, but it still didn't look good. I still needed to, I knew it would be better if I colored in the Pink Panther, that pink color. But, it had been such a long haul, and I've got other things to do, and there was just a little voice inside that kind of didn't pay attention, even though I knew it would be better. It was not full honoring of the idea to leave the Pink Panther uncolored. But I thought it looked pretty good, so I handed it in. And I remember it was my science teacher, who I really liked. She was very honest with me, always, lovely soul. And she said, I got second prize. And she came up, she said, you would have gotten first prize if, you guessed it, if you had colored in the Pink Panther. And I remember that little voice inside. And so what stopped me from honoring, really, what I recognized would have been full expression? What was that little? And I've seen it come up, and now it's like this crazy little voice inside that if I ever feel I am not fully honoring my capacity, that will be, remember the Pink Panther. You don't want to live that way. This kind of keeps us from not fully reaching the finish line, if you will, from not fully recognizing. It kind of keeps us on the other side. So you see this a lot in the organization of the Brahma Kumaris, the early days especially, this incredible drive or determination, some might even say ambition, even though it was still very spiritual, very respectful, very humble. But and I think ultimately what the power of recognition is, where it gets interesting in Raj Yoga, that drive for full completion is actually being recognized by God. Does something to us. And you almost want to fulfill that vision. We could say fulfill the hopes, but fulfill that vision. It's very powerful when someone looks at you with that kind of confidence. And now that I think about the Pink Panther story and that science teacher, I remember she used to look at me that way. She had a lot of confidence in me and would always give me lots of opportunities. But I remember that feeling. I think that was part of the Pink Panther story, is that she would have expected me. I think I knew she would have expected me to color it in, but that vision really, I was always touched at how the vision of someone looking at you and seeing you in quite a deep way, your capacities can pull you. to that finish line can pull you beyond limitations. And this is a huge part of what happens in yoga, even though it's not physical. What yoga does, it's kind of beautiful. It cuts to the chase. It takes away all the frou-frou and cuts to the experience. That's all we care about is the experience. Some used to joke that, I suppose many sci-fi movies do this, that, if we could just, people say, if I could just have the taste of a triple-decker chocolate cake in a pill without the cake, it would be perfect. And that's what we want. We often say people don't want to learn to meditate. They just want to feel peace. If we could put in a bottle or a pill, no one would learn to meditate. We just want to cut to the chase. And so that's all we're doing, is cutting to the experience. You don't need any of the physical accoutrements. I just want to distill it to the experience, the feeling. And so when we have just the being and another being, God, and what's it like? What's the feelings I have towards that being? And being able to experience the feelings that that being has towards me, that's called yoga, that relationship. And it doesn't require anything physical, actually. You've all experienced it, whether it's writing an email to someone. We're not physically, but you can feel the relationship. We're all very adept in this. So the power of God seeing me is quite remarkable. And it brings out these capacities to override things that you did not think you could override. As long as we say, keep that yoga constantly, have that connection. The minute that connection drops, I'm back into laboring, I'm back into limitations, I'm back into old habits. But if it's like keeping that person in front of you all the time. It pulls us into other levels of operation.
It sounds like then it allows a capacity inside to emerge enough times where it becomes one's natural nature.
Yeah, but you don't really need God anymore.
Wow, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we're coming close to the end of the session. I feel it's a really powerful topic. This 3-part series. So for those who haven't had a chance, these are archived. Please check the playlist. And we'll be sending out the playlists as well through email. We keep glancing to see if there's any questions or anything, but we don't see anything. So please, if any questions come up, please let us know. Thank you for the lovely examples. I think I put you on the spot, especially with the Pink Panther.
That's okay. Thank you.
So maybe we'll close with a little reflection.
At least once, if not many times more during the day, we look in the mirror. And we're probably looking at the physical form, the body. But an invitation, the next time you look in the mirror, see past the body. Look deep, deep inside and really see the self. I, the being who animates this body. Really look at the self. Perhaps begin to see the wonder of the self. I, the being who has gone through so many situations, gained so much experience. Just in one lifetime, the wonders I've performed. Overcoming mistakes, overcoming challenges, working through problems. It's not the body that did it, it's me. Really look and celebrate the self. And in that moment of seeing the self and recognizing the wonder of the self, I might start to taste the way God looks at me. Such elevated vision, nothing to do with the body. Such elevated vision. It's like an elevator for the soul, lifting me into my highest level of operating that can finish everything old and restore what is eternal. Om Shanti.
Shanti, thank you. So one final thought before I hand it over to you. What you're sharing has reminded me a lot actually about the significance of Raksha Bandhan. Because that came up in morning class actually about having your Rakhi tied, which is about promise. So when you were talking about that vision that God has on me, to fulfill that, actually when you're sharing, the first thought that the phrase kept coming inside is that, but I promised myself, and not in a violent way, but why does one ever feel like they want to fulfill a promise they made to somebody or even to themselves? To me, it has a lot to do with override and finishing power. So, but anyways, I don't know if what Rakhi's, that topic of Rakhi for World Meditation Hour, but it did bring that to mind.
It is interesting because most connect Raksha Bandhan, the bondage of protection, to sister tying on the brother, protecting the purity, protecting the honor. But one of the historical applications of the Rakhi was as a king was going off to battle. And it was protection again, but that idea that he would return victorious. And I think that that particular application is very applicable to the topic tonight, to literally, if you were guaranteed ahead, you're going to win the race. You still have to run it, but it's guaranteed you're going to win it. The way you would run would be the fastest you've ever run before, right? So that kind of deep, deep faith and security of the self, I think, is very powerful.
Thank you. On that final thought, I might recede to the IT hat and let you share about the upcoming sessions. Thank you for those joining online.
So thank you to Nora. And regarding what's to come, greatness is to come, really. Is there anything else to say? Greatness in you is to come. But in addition to that, we have our usual Thursday schedule. 6:45 drop-in meditation experience to 7:30, and then 7:35 to 8:15 interview with the Raj Yoga, specifically focusing on the basics, the essentials of Raj Yoga, soul, supreme soul, karma, etc. And then, as was mentioned, this is the third Sunday of the month coming up. So this Sunday, August 16th, will be World Meditation Hour, and we will dedicate it to exploring the significance of Raksha Bandhan and really the relevance in these times. And of course, for those who are celebrating this, happy Janmashtami. So today into tomorrow, celebrating the first prince of the perfect world, Krishna. So thank you for joining tonight, and until we meet again, Om Shanti.